Shellfish, swimming beaches, and drinking water for thousands of Washington residents are being contaminated by pollutants from farms.
Critics call dairy farms the chief culprit, and a Come 4 investigation reveals government regulators are failing to stop that pollution.
Problem solver Jeff Burnside reports that almost none of Washington's roughly 700 dairy farms, some with thousands of cows, have a permit to pollute.
We'd gone to Whatcom County to look from public roads at dairy farms.
But I think it's time you guys go home. You know,
It's time for us to go home, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's time for you guys to go home.
And we're quickly met
Be happy to talk with you.
by agitated dairymen who saw our camera.
But it's just the fact that it doesn't need to be publicized.
But what does that mean? It doesn't need to be publicized. What's the it?
There's nitrates,
Nitrates, a threat to human health. They come from cow manure when it moves into the groundwater. In large doses, nitrates are a threat to human health. State and federal health agencies routinely warn that high levels of nitrates found in drinking water can cause blue baby syndrome, may increase chances of certain birth defects, and is associated, though not conclusively, with increased incidence of cancer in adults. A single dairy farm these days can have thousands of cows and put all that manure into these holding ponds or lagoons. The problem is they leak, roughly 500 gallons per day per acre, even if built properly, according to the State Department of Ecology, and they're not required to be lined to stop that leaking. Sometimes lagoons overload and break, spewing it out. Once in the aquifer just feet below, those nitrates get into drinking water from wells. The Washington Department of Ecology found nitrate contaminants above maximum acceptable levels in 29% of the wells used by homes in Whatcom County, the most contaminated in the state.
The notice is tacked on our front door.
Lori Adderley has to buy jug water to keep her family safe.
I'm not really happy about it. I don't think that it should be that way. I don't think I should have to worry about my tap water.
I am outraged.
Andrea Rogers is with the Western Environmental Law Center and is suing polluting dairies. She believes well water contamination from factory farms is one of the most significant public health threats facing Washington state, where 1 million people get drinking water from wells.
The agencies who are enforcing the environmental laws have looked the other way.
Why have they looked the other way?
They've looked the other way because of the politics.
It is declared passed.
State lawmakers took away the regulation of dairies from the Department of Ecology, even though it enforces the U.S. Clean Water Act. Instead, it was given to the Department of Agriculture, whose mission is to promote the agriculture industry.
Their job is not to protect the environment. They don't have the expertise.
Are you tough enough on them?
I think we are.
Virginia Prest is the Department of Agriculture's key dairy regulator and says she's a good friend of dairy farmers. She says dairy farmers want to get it right and usually do. A dozen or so have built, with taxpayer help, these digesters that recycle the manure as a good way to get rid of it.
I think we have to be a tough inspector to actually support the industry.
But the law says you cannot pollute the water. Fines can be $10,000 a day. Yet the Department of Agriculture says it prefers voluntary compliance rather than fines, issuing just 9 such fines in Whatcom since 2008.
They do a lot of really positive.
At the start of our interview with the Washington Dairy Federation,
I'd like to get out here at 9:20 if at all possible.
That leaves us only
10 minutes.
8 minutes.
Oh boy. Okay.
Fred Ickles says he didn't have a lot of time to give us on this very complex subject. If dairymen acknowledge their lagoons leak, it might mean they'd have to get permits that require pollution monitoring as the law demands.
I'm just trying to establish whether you believe lagoons leak.
Once again, Jeff, that's not a question that I can answer.
Shouldn't you know whether lagoons leak?
Absolutely. I do consider it an important issue. But as an environmental consultant, I can't be an expert in every area.
But there's a second problem, fecal coliform. When lagoons get full, all that manure is pumped out and put on fields as fertilizer, sometimes way too much of it just to get rid of it. As a result, the fecal coliform gets into rivers like the Nooksack, where it empties the contaminants onto swimming beaches and prime shellfish beds in Puget Sound.
Unfortunately, for the second time, our tribe did have to close our shellfish beds in Portage Bay.
The Lummies have been harvesting shellfish here for thousands of years. It is who they are.
If we can't practice the harvest, our way of life's compromised,
Is dairy manure chiefly responsible again for closing shellfish beds, as the state found last time in 1997, declaring dairy farms represent a high probability of being the principal source of fecal coliform contamination? Ballou is inclined to blame the dairy industry this time, too.
It probably played a very significant role.
So even though all experts and even dairy regulators agree all dairies pollute, just 1% of Washington's dairies has a permit. Jeff Burnside, KOMO 4 News.